Welcome to the Qasim Rashid Show, a civil rights lawyer here to expose all forms of injustice with a sprinkling of dad jokes in between. Here's your host, Qasim Rashid.
Good morning and peace be upon you this beautiful day, wherever you're tuning in from. My name is Qasim Rashid, and this is the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. Ramadan Mubarak. Yes, the holy month of Ramadan has begun for 1.9 billion Muslims worldwide, including for me. And so I'm fasting while you are listening to this. And I just want to spend like 30 seconds on Ramadan because we've got a really important show I also want to get into. Salam Bhatti is here, the poverty lawyer, national thought leader in the space, to make sense of this ridiculous Republican bill to cut Medicaid and SNAP and TANF. This is going to hurt all of us. And even if you are not on Medicaid or SNAP, it's going to hurt you, because when your neighbors are hurt and their ability to function is hurt, it's going to hurt you. We need to start remembering this is not a left versus right thing in terms of working people. It's class warfare. And Salam's going to talk about how bad the situation is and then what you can do to play a meaningful role to counter this right-wing assault on our basic human rights and human dignity. So I want to talk briefly, though, first about Ramadan, because a lot of misconceptions out there. People think we're fasting for 30 days, period. Like, no food for 30 days. And that's not true. It's no food from sunrise to sunset. And yes, the famous, the joke is a famous white people proverb, not even water? Yes, not even water. And so you stop eating at sunrise, you start eating again at sunset. The goal of that is manifold. One of them, probably the most important one, is to help you have empathy for humanity, to help you understand what it's like to not have enough to eat, and to then motivate you to do better in terms of serving others, of taking care of your fellow neighbors, your fellow human beings, increasing your charity, breaking bad habits. And the rules of fasting are important too, right? You only fast if you're healthy, if you're sick, if you're traveling, if you're nursing, if you're pregnant, if you're a woman, you're up there on your period, you don't fast. It's not designed to be devastating to your body. It's designed to enhance your body when you're already healthy. Children don't fast. The elderly don't fast. You don't fast while you're traveling. And so, the folks who insist on these things are actually causing more harm than any potential good. But in addition to fasting, you increase your prayers, you increase your reflection, you break any bad habits that you might have. You find ways to reconcile relationships. You find ways to build community. And ultimately, you take those habits you develop in this month and you take them through the rest of the year as well. And what's always been really exciting for me about Ramadan is the spirituality aside, the physical benefits, the health benefits are amazing. You refine your diet, you eat healthier, your blood pressure goes down, your cholesterol goes down. You end up being healthier overall, and you have more energy, and you build those better habits. So if you want to partake, you're most welcome to. But I hope you take time to learn about it. I'll give a final plug to my book, Hana and the Ramadan Gift. It's a children's book I wrote with Penguin a couple years ago. I love the book, and I'll be doing a Substack live reading of the book as well if you want to check it out. When we come back from break, I'm going to bring on Salam Bhatti, who's an expert on poverty law and the really painful choices that are being made that are causing the poverty in this country right now, and how we need to do better and what we can actually do to make it better. And then we're going to close out the show talking about this myth of small government. You've heard this before, and this is what the MAGA regime is doing right now, that we want smaller government. That's why we're firing everybody. Understand this. The phrase small government is a racist trope. It is a racist trope because conservatives have always welcomed big government spending when it benefits predominantly or exclusively white Americans. But when Black and brown people ask for those exact same benefits, then suddenly we need to stop being a welfare state. Then suddenly it's pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Then suddenly it's small government. And I promise you, I have all the receipts to back this up. When we come back from break, we're going to start with Salam Bhatti and go from there. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View, channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. I'm excited to welcome back. Excited might be the wrong word because he's an expert on poverty law, and poverty is about to become the law. And that's a problem. But Salam Bhatti is one of the leading national voices on combating poverty in the United States. He's a good kind of lobbyist. He's the kind of person that shows up at the offices of members of Congress and tells them, hey, dummy, this will make people starve. Don't do this. And his work has been fantastic in Virginia, for example, where he's helped pass meaningful legislation that's gotten tens of thousands of families access to food that they wouldn't have had otherwise. He's now working on the federal level. And I'm grateful to have him here, especially as MAGA Republicans are gutting Medicaid, gutting SNAP, gutting school lunches, for God's sake, all to pay for a massive tax cut for billionaires. And he's here to break it down, make sense of it, and hopefully give us some hope on how we can prevent this piece of legislation from becoming law. Salam, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for making time for this.
You know, it's one of those things. I feel like we're in this constant rat race where you look at, when Democrats are in office, there's always this, well, we have to follow the procedure, we have to follow the rules, and no, we don't have the votes, we can't make it happen. And then Republicans, so they don't accomplish what they need to accomplish. Poverty rose 67% under Biden-Harris. And I say this as somebody who ran for Congress as a Democrat and supported Biden-Harris. But poverty rose 67%. And now you've got this really fascist bill. And you actually had a couple of Republican holdouts that would have been enough to block it in the House. And the word is Donald Trump called these Republicans personally, yelled so loudly that people in the room could hear him yelling through the phone, even though he wasn't on speaker. And then Republicans who were staunchly opposed to this bill came out of their offices and said, yeah, I support this bill. Am I crazy, or is it too much to ask that Joe Biden should have done the same thing to pass things like Build Back Better, or to demand that we protect the child tax credit, or I don't know, guaranteed universal health care, things that actually save lives?
Yeah, it's no, it's a bad plan that we have in front of us with the House budget resolution that passed. It's not just a bad plan in general, but it's a bad plan right now, especially because USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, released a report last year showing that food insecurity is on the rise. And so we're seeing not just food insecurity being on the rise, but grocery prices being on the rise. Yep. Eggs, I can't even keep track of. I mean, eggs are doing better than the stocks right now if you wanted to invest in something, right? If you can even find them. So at a time when millions of people throughout our communities are suffering and struggling with hunger, the Congress, the people who are elected to represent our interests, are saying, let's cut the very programs that are helping you put food on the table. And it's not just, a dollar cut or a $10 cut. It's a $230 billion cut. That's billion with a B, from SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. That is a 20% cut over the next 9 years. Some people mistakenly think that that's a cut to administration, to staffing, to printing, this, that, the other, and that somehow that type of cut will increase their benefits. No, there isn't that type of money in the administration of SNAP. This is coming out from the benefits. And we know this because this is what Republicans have been trying to do for the past few years, ever since something known as the Thrifty Food Plan was adjusted. Now, the Thrifty Food Plan is what the SNAP benefit amount is based on. For about 50 years, the SNAP benefit never increased due to adjusting the Thrifty Food Plan. And the Thrifty Food Plan takes things into consideration like what people are buying at grocery stores. What's the cost?
Wait, so talk to me like I'm four. Is the Thrifty Food Plan a piece of legislation? Is it a policy initiative? What is this? Like, where does this exist?
So the USDA has 4 different types of meal plans to figure things out of how much things cost and what it takes to have the most nutritious diet at those individual plans. The Thrifty Food Plan is the cheapest. It's called Thrifty it's super cheap. And that is what gives us before 2021, the $4.80 per person per day. that people got in SNAP benefits. And when you look at what the USDA advised on what you should buy with that, it was things like 20 pounds of oranges a week, 12 pounds of potatoes a week. It was really weird, disconnected types of dietary guidelines. And these types of dietary guidelines do not work today. These are
No,
outdated
no.
and
But
outdated.
$4.80 per person per day. That was before 2021. What is it now?
It's $6.20 per person per day now. It
So they
was,
want people to live off of $6.20 a day. That gets you like 4 eggs right now.
yeah, it's terrible. And so I work at the Food Research and Action Center known as FRAC. We are hosting a SNAP challenge from March 18th through the 20th to show people how difficult it is to live on $6 per person per day. And here's the, if in case your listeners want to join, go to frac.org/snap challenge and join the participants in this challenge. We're also seeing that this 20% cut could very well be a rollback of that 2021
Yeah,
increase. So
yeah.
not just preventing future increases, but actually taking that $1.20 increase per average and going back down to $4.80. It's going to be really bad.
It's horrifying. I will point out two things. One, I think it's really convenient that you push through the frag challenge during Ramadan when you're going to be fasting anyway. So it works out well for you. He's like, I got this. This is no problem. But on a more serious note, it's always like it's pissed me off when I think about the fact that the whole mantra from these conservative politicians is if we want to motivate poor people, we need to take away food and take away resources and force them to work harder. Meanwhile, if we want to motivate billionaires, we got to give them even more money and more power. Like, it's so obvious that you don't actually care about motivating people. You're just punishing the poor for being poor, and you're rewarding the rich for being rich. It's like, and then to say, well, this is what Jesus would have wanted. It's like the most asinine, ass backwards philosophy you can imagine. But they actually seem to believe it. And what kills me is how many folks. I had a tweet go viral the other day, and I specifically say tweet because in this house we call it Twitter still. And I had posted the same remarks on other platforms where it also performed well. But on Twitter, because it's mostly MAGAs, more MAGAs there, I should say, the number one response, and the tweet, I gotta pull it up real quickly. It was regarding what's happening with Snap and with the gutting of all, yeah, here it is. So I said, understand what's happening. MAGAs are gutting Medicaid, which 60 million Americans rely on, SNAP, which 40 million Americans rely on to eat, school lunch, which 30 million kids rely on daily, housing assistance, which 5 million families rely on to live, all to cut 4.5 trillion in taxes for 800 billionaires. That's barbaric. And the number one response, Salam, from MAGA Republicans was what? It was, you're lying. Trump would never do that to us. This is fake news. It's propaganda. He promised never to cut Medicaid. He promised to increase the money in our pocket. You are lying and you're making our country worse. And I'm sitting here thinking, like, there's a train headed towards your house. And given our transportation issues in this country, that's not a metaphor anymore. And you're sitting here pretending that it's just, I don't know, thunder or something. And it's going to hit you all the same. And that's fundamental. Like, how do we get past that? Like, when you have these conversations, I'm sorry, I'm trying to form this rant into a question. Islam, when you have these conversations with these folks who are just hell bent on putting people through hell, how do you crack through that like cult-like mentality that no, Trump will never lie to us? How do you get them to understand that this is not a left versus right issue? This is class warfare of billionaires against working class people, and whether you're red or blue, you're gonna suffer the same way.
Yeah, it's hard in the sense that talking policy it's very wonky. It's in people's eyes glaze over. And when you have the quote unquote sexy things that people are saying on Twitter, it's very hard to get into the actual facts of what they're saying and how much misinformation is being spread. So one of the things that we just put out is fact sheets on what SNAP is doing, not just for families, but the entire ecosystem of communities. So, for example, Illinois. In Illinois,
Where I live.
SNAP
Yeah.
brings in, and yeah, I just wanted to just keep it specific for you here. SNAP brings in a monthly average into the state $295 million every
Hmm.
single month. And with that money, we're seeing veterans, we're seeing over 44,000 veterans receiving SNAP benefits. We're
Wow.
seeing 37% of the SNAP households having those who are over 60. 44% of those households have somebody with a disability, and 45% have somebody with kids.
Wow.
So that's the SNAP household, right? That's the families
Yeah.
that are benefiting.
Yeah.
Now, it's not just that, but it's also when it comes to the economy, we see over 9,000 retailers, convenience stores, small businesses, grocery stores in Illinois alone who are receiving SNAP benefits and helping customers
Yeah.
receive their
Yeah.
SNAP benefits. And
Seismic.
that brings in an annual $5.8 billion into Illinois. Now imagine a 20% cut of that, which is what
Yep.
the Republicans are offering. That will absolutely cause small grocery stores, small convenience stores, and we're looking into rural parts of Illinois where 1 in 7 households are receiving SNAP benefits. This will cause small stores in rural America to shut down, and it
Yeah.
will exacerbate food insecurity.
It'll have a domino effect, and we're already seeing it with farmers on how they're at risk of losing their farms because the Trump regime has suspended funding from the infrastructure bill. And these farmers are sharing their stories of how they made these purchases and investments with the understanding that this money was coming through, and now it's not, and now they're screwed. And
Mhm.
one of the data points I think I've heard you cite before, and you can give me the updated data on it, but something like for every dollar spent in SNAP, it's $1.74 back into the economy.
Yeah, during a downturn. Yep.
Exactly. And it's like, what a concept. You invest in people and they spend money and it helps the economy. 90% of the money people spend is in their local economy. So if you want to support small businesses, you make sure people have money to spend in those small businesses. And so all these cuts that you're seeing, they're not cuts to waste, fraud, and abuse. There's very little waste, fraud, and abuse in SNAP. No one is
Mhm.
going out and trying to get an extra chicken sandwich for free. Like that's not how things work, right? People don't waste food. It's like, and I grew up on SNAP. We grew up on Section 8 and on SNAP. And I can tell you that there was not a single morsel of food ever wasted because you knew how difficult it was to get that food in the first place. We didn't waste food. We ate every bit of it. And we were a sports household. I know you and your family were as well. And when you're a sports household and you're running track or playing soccer or basketball, whatever the sport is, you're hungry all the time. And the idea that kids today, I think 1 in 9 children in America are food insecure, 1 in 6 Americans, 1 in 9 kids, that those kids are now going to be further demonized and demoralized, denied free school lunches. It's a recipe for disaster. And when I talk about domino effect, I don't just mean hunger. I mean, this will lead to higher rates of depression. This will lead to higher rates of death by suicide. This will lead to higher rates of substance abuse. I mean, it has a domino effect. And the not the cynic in me, the realist in me points out that the Trump regime is also investing heavily in private prisons. Private prison stocks are booming right now because they know that when you increase poverty, you increase crime, and therefore you've got more uh, basically human chattel at this point to put into those prisons. This is how sinister this is. And we need to take this for what it actually is, because this is not a theory. This is a proven model of how autocratic regimes crack down using class warfare to demonize people and to exacerbate poverty. If you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Salam Bhatti of FRAC, a federal nonprofit working on combating poverty. Let's talk solutions, Salam. I know you're kind of unique in this space because you do this for a living, and you've got the expertise, you got the law degree, you've got the good looks, the good hair, you've got a lot of things, you got a lot of good things going for you. What about the rest of us normal people who don't have what you have, Salam? How can we achieve what you're achieving?
Yeah, that's the important thing that we're doing at FRAC is getting the public involved. On one side, we are engaging with Congress. On the other side, we're engaging with the public because we cannot do this without everybody understanding that we can change this. Poverty is a policy choice. You see, SNAP, which was created, it's not something that just came out of nowhere. The Congress created this program. And just the same, we can create actual systems that will solve for poverty. Right now, we're seeing an attempt to make poverty worse. It's a policy choice. And on
Yes.
the other side, we as the people can say, hey, listen, we can do better than this, and we must do better than this. So, one thing that people can do is sign up for our newsletter, of course, frac.org, but really join the SNAP Challenge because we need advocates all across the country to raise their voices to their Congress members. I mean, right now, we're in a very pivotal time in American history where reconciliation is happening. Long word, let me explain what that is real quick. The House, there's the House and the Senate. The House voted for their budget. The Senate also voted for their budget, and they have two very different budgets. So now it's something called reconciliation. They need to reconcile these two budgets and make every single number match on both, which is going to take some time. And the deadline, quote unquote, is like March 14th when they need to get all of this done. Otherwise, there's a government shutdown, unless they do some, back alley magic. But the reconciliation process is when Republicans get together behind closed doors and figure this stuff out. So within this next week, you need to call your members of Congress and you need to just raise a lot of conundrum, if I can say the rated G word. Just let them know that you must demand no cuts to SNAP, no cuts to Medicaid, which are on the chopping blocks of over $1 trillion in this budget that the House passed. And we have to understand that there are a lot of people who are living in mixed districts where the voices of the voters can effectuate change.
Yep.
And we just need a few Republicans to understand how bad this would be for their district and for their people. So really, that number one priority right now is contact your members of Congress. If they're having town halls, go visit their town halls and let them know no cuts to SNAP.
Yeah, and by the way, members of Congress are required to document the calls they get and the issue about which they're calling. It's a requirement. And so when you call, even if nobody picks up, you leave a voice message. When you send an email, even if you don't get a response, it has to be recorded. And so make those calls and be relentless. And I don't care if you live in a Republican district and you think they're not going to listen, because they still need to hear from you. They'll still need to understand. And look, we don't need to get 40 Republicans to switch. We need to get like 2, 3, right? There's not this overwhelming gargantuan hill that we have to overcome. It really is just a couple. And by the way, we got one, Thomas Massey, of all people. That's the last person I would have expected. And look, I know Salam is saying, hold on a second, don't praise him. I'm not praising him. I'm just acknowledging that despite all of his craziness and flaws, on this one vote, he did vote. If we had gotten one more Republican, then the bill wouldn't have passed. So that's my only point, that we just need to find one or two other Republicans who, for whatever reason, decide that their motivation to kill SNAP and TANF is not strong enough to vote with Republicans. I don't really care what the reason is at this point. I just don't want kids to starve. That's not a controversial take. That's my hot take. But if it's controversial, then too bad, because I will take a vote where I can get it. Mr. Butty, your response.
Yeah, I think it is a hot take because the House budget resolution proposes to cut school meals.
Yeah.
They're looking to, so there's something called the community eligibility provision. It's a wonky word that people don't understand. That's actually about school meals. So when they say, "Oh, we're going to cut community eligibility provision," people's eyes glaze over. If you press Control F or Command F if you're an Apple user, you're not going to find school meals. You're going to see community eligibility provision.
Yeah.
And this is a program that offers meals to all students in schools at no charge. So this would make getting free school meals harder, and it would increase school burdens because now the students would have to go back to going through the application process. And we should have our lunch ladies making the meals instead of processing paperwork.
That's right. That's right. And I mean, this is kind of one of the sinister things they do. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in the show, but when they'll name these pieces of legislation something positive, right? Like right now, there's the SAVE Act, right? Save Our Democracy Act, where it's a piece of legislation Republicans are trying to pass That would demonstrably purge millions of voters and make voting difficult for tens of millions of people. If you are a woman who has ever changed your name because you, God forbid, got married, then you would need to re-register and go through an entire new registration process. And some women will be able to, many will not, but that's enough to prevent them from voting. And it's this whole restriction of the voting process that they're engaging in. And by the way, I learned kind of off subject, but this goes back to George W., who after stealing the 2000 election with his friends in Florida, purging the voter rolls of black voters in particular with made up excuses, started I think in 2002 signed a like keep your rolls clean act or some trash like that, where it became a regular practice to start to purge voter rolls. And in the 2024 election, we saw an unprecedented number of voters purged just because arbitrary reasons, no actual reason behind it. And obviously that impacted the outcome of the election. But coming back to this subject here, make phone calls. I get that. Go to local town halls. I get that as well. You know, some people are hungry now and they don't have time for Congress to get their crap together. What do you do if you're hungry now? Does FRAC have tools that folks can go to find food banks, to find access to food, to find other resources if they got hungry, rambunctious kids and they still need food?
Yeah, some years ago, I helped create what is now known as snapscreener.com. And that's a place where you can screen yourself and see if you're eligible for SNAP. But you can also find places that are close to you that are providing food, pantries, charities, this, that, the other, for that immediate need. So go ahead, visit snapscreener.com. But that's another thing, Qasim. Like charities, food banks, they cannot fill the gap.
Yeah,
They
that's correct.
say, for every meal that we provide, SNAP provides nine.
Yeah,
And if you're gonna, in some, some Congress members say, we have great infrastructure on the local level to accommodate when we cut SNAP. We don't. And local elected officials, mayors, town councils, they should be in the fight as well to say, no, we do not have the infrastructure, we do not have the funds, we barely have the budget to accommodate what we have right now. We need the long arm of the federal government to continue funding SNAP, because what it does is incredible, not just for our families, but for our entire local economies.
and I need folks to understand when we talk about this budgeting aspect, it's not that we don't have the resources to support those in need. It's that we cannot satisfy billionaire greed. And the perfect example of that is the military budget, right? 1 in 4 active duty military families are food insecure. How the hell do we have $1 trillion military budget, and let alone veterans and the atrocity of what we put veterans through, where after they sacrifice their lives for us, we say, good luck, go figure it out for yourself. But even active duty, 1 in 4 active duty military families, these giant budgets for the defense do not go to actually supporting our troops, whatever the hell that means anymore. They go to these defense contractors, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, to make these weapons of war to sell and make themselves wealthier. The arms trade is cataclysmic to our economy, to climate change, to global peace and security. Meanwhile, 1 in 4 active duty military families are on SNAP benefits because they're just not getting paid enough to live and to
Well,
survive in this economy.
well, no, there's actually a distinction here. It's not that they're on SNAP benefits. They actually aren't even eligible for SNAP benefits because of their military housing allowance. Now, the military
Oh
housing
yeah,
allowance is
even
money
more.
that they are given specifically just for their housing. But unfortunately, it counts as income.
Yeah.
So money they can't even use for food is being counted against them. And so we're working on a bill to exclude the military housing allowance from the income eligibility. But this is stuff that really grinds my gears, Qasim, is that there's all these nuances, that all
Yeah.
these like symptoms that we need to fix when we really need to be focusing on the root cause as a nation. And this,
Yes.
it goes to the Gordian knot of poverty, where everybody's trying to undo the knot and they make it worse. Alexander the Great comes in, just cuts the knot in half. Like, we don't
Yep.
even need the knot. We don't
Yep.
need poverty, and we can solve for it.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, Dr. Michelle Alexander talks about this in her book, The New Jim Crow, about like kind of like the birdcage phenomenon. That if you are zoomed in on a birdcage and you're looking at just one wire, and somebody says, well, this wire is oppressing me, somebody who's zoomed in on that one wire will be like, well, you're kind of a dummy. Just go around the wire. That's it. It's a thin little wire. Just go around it. You're fine. But you zoom out. Oh, well, there's a second wire. Well, then just go around that one too. And then you zoom out the third wire. Well, dude, you're so dumb. Just go around the third wire. And pretty soon you keep going around and you realize, oh, wait, I'm in a cage. I can't escape the confines of this. And that's exactly how poverty is designed to function at this point. If you're too poor to afford food, guess what? You're probably too poor to afford healthcare as well. You don't have enough food, your health suffers, but then you don't have healthcare. So that toothache, and there's somebody posted about this on Twitter. This is not my original idea, but it applies beautifully. That toothache that you didn't take care of at 18, by the time you're 28, you need a root canal, right? That little lump in your shoulder or whatever that you didn't take care of when you were 25, now at 35 is full-blown cancer. The diabetes that you didn't detect when you were 35, now at 45, you need an amputation. I mean, this is why there's such a strong correlation between poverty and mortality. It's why the United States has the lowest life expectancy of any developed country in the world, despite spending more than double per capita on healthcare, because the money isn't going to actual healthcare, it's going to these health corporations. That's what I call health insurance companies, health corporations, health exploitation, limited liability corporations, where they will exploit our health, limit their own liability, and make their massive profits to the tune of billions of dollars. And this is why I've been writing about this in my Substack. I know you have been as well. We really have to stop the culture wars, get away from this MAGA versus liberal, progressive versus centrist mentality. It's all trash to keep us unaware of the fact that we are suffering the worst wealth and income inequality in the history of this country, modern history of this country, worse now than it was before the Great Depression. And until and unless we stand united as one people on the levels of class, we're screwed. It's going to get far, far worse. And it's a message that I'm not seeing in corporate media. I'm not seeing from many politicians as well. And it's the freight train analogy is, it's tearing us all apart, and we're sitting there pointing the finger at one another. We're all poor schmucks while these billionaires are buying their fourth yacht and their fifth private jet and their 50th mansion.
Yeah, and again, when it comes to the culture war that we're seeing, is there's about a dozen states who are saying we need to restrict what people can buy with their SNAP benefits so that they can become healthier. It's a very nanny state paternalistic thing. And if somebody reads that headline, they're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, people should be healthier. And this means that, SNAP participants are not healthy. When in fact, it's not true at all. When you go into the research, SNAP participants are healthier than non-SNAP participants. It's not that they are buying the cheaper food because they want to eat cheaper food. It's because that's all they can afford with that $6 per person per day. You look at the fresh produce, you look at the meats, the dairy. That's the most expensive food in a grocery store or even a convenience store if you can have access to it. So on one hand, affordability is the biggest thing. On the other hand, accessibility is also a problem because we have so many food deserts out there. So when people are doing these performative procedures of saying we need to restrict what people can buy so it'll make them healthier, they're not even getting to the root cause of affordability and accessibility. People want to eat healthy, but they just can't because of these limited budgets. And on the other hand, you also have people who are trying to restrict the healthier foods, calling them luxury foods, and poor people don't deserve to have luxury food. So it's like, what are you going to let them have? What can they have? One slice of lettuce?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to, and I just want our listeners to just contemplate for a minute the $6 a day. I mean, I really go to frac.org/snap challenge, frac.org/snap challenge. Sign up for the snap challenge, go for 3 days and try to live off $6 a day. Just try it. I guarantee you will be ready to, there will be very little that you would not be willing to do to get your kids the food they need.
Oh, and let me tell you, something else. Somebody might be thinking already, I can just buy like a hot rotisserie chicken and that'll hold us off for at least a day. You cannot buy a hot rotisserie chicken. You cannot buy hot food from a grocery store or a convenience store with SNAP benefits. That's just unfortunately the law.
That's
Um,
wild. That's
and in case you're like, I have
incredible.
a bunch of food in my pantry, nope, you cannot use your pantry food. Only what you buy during that time is what you can use.
So $18 for 3 days.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
18 bucks. I've been to coffee shops where coffee plus a croissant plus tip is 18 bucks.
Yep.
It was an airport coffee shop, and I had no choice because it's an airport and they have a monopoly on this stuff. But nonetheless, you're not going to an airport anyway with 18 bucks. That's
Mhm.
wild. And so I encourage you guys. And look, there's a value, and it kind of goes back to, I talked earlier in the show about Ramadan starting. One of the points of Ramadan, and I think one of the points of the Snap Challenge is the same, that you experience the struggle that literally millions, if not billions of people globally go through, not by choice, on a daily basis. And when you voluntarily put yourself through that experience, that helps you build the empathy to then take action and to be more deliberate in your actions. So whether you're left, right, or center, I encourage you to engage in the Snap Challenge. And Islam, we're down to our last minute here. Uh, how can folks find you? How can folks support you and support your advocacy? Definitely plug your Substack here as well, because I think folks need to know they have a resource to answer these kinds of questions and have calls to action.
Yeah, where Frack is all over the internet. Frack tweets on Twitter, Frack Graham on Instagram. You can find me on Blue Sky, Twitter, and Instagram at Poverty Lawyer, and frack.org is a great resource site.
All right, Salam, thank you for being with us. Thanks for the work you're doing to help stop poverty in this country. We've got a long way to go, but I'm glad to know we've got fighters like you at the forefront, um, you know, uh, holding the line as best as you possibly can.
And we welcome every single person that's listening to join us.
You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. When we come back, I want to do a deeper dive into this whole conservative mythology about, we want smaller government. This is a racist trope, and most folks don't even realize it. I'm going to go into the history of it, bring the receipts, as I always do. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back. You're listening to the Qasim Rashid Show here on Sirius XM Urban View Channel 126, the most awesome show in the multiverse. That was Salam Bhatti, and I highly, highly, highly encourage y'all to try the Snap Challenge. Go to frac.org/snap challenge, frac.org/snap challenge, and try to go 3 days with spending only $6 a day on food. And no hot food either. Remember, no hot food. It's against the rules. No food that you already have at home. The only food you can eat is what you can afford on $6 a day. See if you can do that for 3 days. And then imagine doing that for 365 days. And I especially hope that the people who think that low-income people are lazy, I hope you take this, because you'll find that it's not laziness. You'll find that low-income people are some of the hardest working people that you have in existence. We have a system that has made poverty a policy choice, forcing them to make poverty a life sentence. And it shouldn't be that way. And we can do better. We can demand better, which kind of goes to this conversation about the small government myth. We need to understand the deeply racist past behind this phrase of small government, because that's how we better stop the exploitation of America's working people going forward. And the receipts I'm going to provide are going to be eye-opening to many, not to all of you, because I know many of you know some of this stuff, but I think it's important to consolidate and kind of organize this to really show how systemic this racial infrastructure is in the history of the United States. Conservatives loved to champion themselves as a party of small government, arguing that people should learn to pick themselves up by their bootstraps. But here's the thing. History, their own actions, they tell a very different story. The truth is that conservatives have never wanted small government, ever. Conservatives have never wanted small government. They have always wanted government that disproportionately benefits white Americans while cutting resources for Black and brown communities. And that's not my opinion. There's ample receipts throughout American history, even up through today, that back up this fact. And unless leaders, especially on the left, recognize this as the nature of the fight that we're in and respond effectively to counter that harmful impact, we're going to continue to suffer. You know, Ronald Reagan popularized the famously racist welfare queen trope, alleging that it was a Black woman who received multiple welfare checks for multiple children, and it was all welfare fraud. The fact, of course, is that this is a false and racist projection. We know that 9 of the top 10 states that have the largest recipients for federal welfare are red states. We know that white Americans receive more welfare benefits than does any other demographic. And we know that white opposition, the Washington Post did a study on this, the white opposition to welfare is largely due to racial resentment that Black and brown people are also getting those benefits. And none of this is new. We've had a history of big government, but for white people only. And so for centuries, white Americans have been the primary beneficiaries of big government policies that provided them primary, in fact, in many cases, exclusive economic security, land ownership, immigration access, education access, social welfare benefits, generational wealth. The myth that conservatives oppose government welfare spending simply ignores the facts that white Americans have historically received and continue to receive massive government benefits at the exclusion of Black and brown people. So let me give you a couple of examples. I talked about receipts. Here are some of the receipts I'm talking about. The Homestead Act, passed in 1862. U.S. government gave away 270 million acres of land almost exclusively to white settlers, laying the foundation for the generational wealth in rural America across the country that you see today among white people. It's why white Americans, the median white family wealth is $160,000. The median Black family wealth is $3,600. Meanwhile, formerly enslaved Black Americans were promised 40 acres and a mule, a promise that was never fulfilled. No reparations were ever made to them for their 300 years of slavery under which they told. No accommodation of the Homestead Act was made for them. No reparations were given to indigenous peoples from whom 270 million acres of land were stolen. And for those saying, well, the Homestead Act, come on, that was like, 1862. Come on, nobody alive today was alive in 1862. Oh, you're right. But did you know when the Homestead Act was finally fully repealed? 1987. I was alive in 1987. Many folks listening were alive in 1987. That's when the Homestead Act was finally repealed. So don't give me this crap about, oh, it's ancient history. No. I remember 1987, for God's sake. Let's talk about immigration and this whole Trump fascination, this fetish he has with rounding up immigrants and deporting them and setting up concentration camps in Cuba. Up until 1965, white people enjoyed near exclusive, undocumented access to U.S. immigration. European immigrants were welcomed with open arms, while Asians, Latinos, Black immigrants were explicitly banned and severely restricted. Post-Civil War, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 restricted most East Asian immigration, while European immigration was allowed. And that European immigration that was allowed included the 1916 immigration of an undocumented immigrant who had a criminal record, who had no actual skills, who was unable to speak English, yet was allowed to enter the United States anyway. You know who that undocumented criminal, illegal alien, as Trump would say, was? His name was Friedrich Drumpf, grandfather of Donald J. Trump. A year later, after he immigrated, the Immigration Act of 1917 was passed. Oh, so you must be thinking this must be to ensure that Friedrich Trump and people like him could never immigrate again. No. The Immigration Act of 1917 banned Africans, Latinos, and most Asians and other non-whites from entering the United States. And then the Immigration Act of 1924 completely banned all Asian immigration while still allowing European immigration. That went on till 1965. Yesterday's newspaper. The GI Bill, 1944, designed to help World War II veterans reintegrate into society with home loans, tuition assistance, and job training. The GI Bill created America's modern middle class, post-World War II. But the more than 1 million Black American soldiers who fought fascism in World War II were blocked out of the GI Bill. No reparations to the families of those Black Americans who are very much alive today. White veterans used the GI Bill to build family wealth, start businesses, invest in the booming post-World War II US economy. Black soldiers, more than 1 million of them, got nothing. Absolutely nothing for making the same sacrifice. And by the way, this is after they were paid less. FHA loans and redlining. It wasn't just Black soldiers to whom the US government screwed over. It was Black people in general. The US government gave FHA loans, Federal Housing Administration loans, at 0% or no interest or low interest to white families, but redlined Black families and said, nope, we're not going to give them to you. Those homes that sold for $10,000 in the 1940s and 1960s, those are $500,000 homes now. They've generated $500,000 or more in generational wealth to pay for college tuition, to start businesses, to buy newer homes, to buy newer cars, to give their children sizable inheritances. Again, this is why I point out the median white family in America has $160,000 as their median wealth. Median Black family, $3,600. It's not by accident. It's made possible by the government being big government for white families and small government for Black and brown people. Because remember, Asians couldn't even immigrate during that time. Legacy admissions. Many of the elite universities today were built on Jim Crow era policies, where Black students were denied admission altogether. And now legacy admission says, if your father or grandfather went to Harvard or went to Yale during Jim Crow when Black and brown people weren't allowed, but your grandfather was because he was white, you get admission. You know, while conservatives went nuts at affirmative action because they thought it would disproportionately help Black people, when they protested the 8% Black students at Harvard, legacy admissions and sports admissions, which disproportionately go to white people, accounted for nearly half of white students. They were upset about the 8% Black students, but missed nearly the half of white students at Harvard there because of legacy admissions. And if you're thinking, well, they may have been legacy, but they were still qualified. No. A Washington Post study found that 75% of those white students would not have qualified on merit. And they only got in because their father or grandfather went to Harvard during Jim Crow America. It was never about ensuring meritocracy. It was always about upholding white supremacy. And you might be thinking, well, that was then. Now, surely there's equity in education. You would think so. A recent analysis by EdBuild found that more than a half century after schools were desegregated, white majority districts received 23 billion with a B more in funding annually when compared with districts that serve mostly Black and Latino students. That means, as the report concludes, that for every student enrolled, the average non-white school receives $2,200 less per student than a white school. Think about that. Imagine what you could do for your students if you had an extra $2,200 per student. Imagine how you could pay teachers better, better facilities, better sports facilities, better college training, better jobs training. $2,200 per student every single year, happening right now in 2025 America. And finally, I want to talk about big government policies, affirmative action. If you're surprised that affirmative action is on this list of government programs that disproportionately benefit white people, don't be. For two reasons. One, because affirmative action was never about admitting unqualified Black people. It was always about ensuring qualified Black people also were considered for employment and education. I'm going to say that again. Affirmative action was never about admitting unqualified Black people. It was always about ensuring qualified Black people and brown people, Latinos, Asians, what have you, were also considered for education and employment. And the second reason why you should not be surprised that affirmative action is on this list of government programs that disproportionately benefit white people is because a half century of data of applying affirmative action policies demonstrates that the single greatest benefit, the single demographic that benefited most from affirmative action, more than Black people, more than Indigenous Americans, more than Asians, more than Latinos, more than all of them combined are white women. Yeah. So even the so-called Black welfare, as a racist called it, helped white people more than every single other demographic combined. And this is not an exhaustive list, but it should paint a clear picture, whether the subject is free land, undocumented immigration, funding via military benefits, affordable housing, top-tier education, general welfare, or generational wealth. The US government has always had big government ideas for white people, small government ideas for Black and brown people. Do not buy into this racist trope. Whew. All right, my friends. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. If you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit that subscribe button so I can continue to create this content. Be sure to follow me on social media at Qasim Rashid across all platforms. We will continue to advance the show that builds on compassion, on justice, and on accountability for those in power. We've got a great show lined up for next week. Be sure to tune in, same time, same place at 10 a.m. Eastern. And again, if you're listening on Substack, make sure you hit the subscribe button. My friends, be fierce, lead with compassion and justice, and continue speaking truth to power. Until next week, peace.